Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. For those of you who are new to my channel, my podcast, we welcome you here with open arms. Make sure to continue to be part of the community by considering to subscribe as well as hitting the bell notification icon to stay up to date for more great information like we're about to have today. For those of you who have been back before, we're going to continue to climb the ladder, to see higher, and to see the world with more wisdom, more clarity, and more mindfulness. Today, my guest is Rob Schwartz. Rob is a best-selling author of multiple books. He also is going to talk about the pre-birth planning, the life plan before we got here. And so we're going to discuss, is this life random? Was there evidential proof that this was, based in an awareness that went beyond this life? Was there a charting and a blueprint before we got here? So this will really open up a lot of minds if you are paying attention and are, available to really start to see things in a different way. I know Rob is going to shed a lot of light on the pre-birth planning and the soul's mission. What is the soul? Why are we here? And so on. And so without further ado, we welcome Rob Schwartz on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. Rob Schwartz, it's a big honor here to have you here on my channel, the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. I've been a student and a fan of yours for many years, as I know many of my viewers have. But for those of you who haven't heard about your work and a lot of the regression work that you do in your Between Lives work, could you maybe describe a little bit about the work that you do, as well as what led you to this? Because from my understanding, you've had quite a transformation in your career trajectory throughout time that I'm sure will inspire countless viewers that listen to our conversation.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me here today. I've known of you for a long time, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. You're doing some great work in the world.
Thank you.
So what happened for me, I was in the corporate world for a number of years doing marketing and communications. Did not like that at all. It was very, very unfulfilling. And then at the age of 40, I had what you could call an existential crisis about my life. I knew that I couldn't continue doing that, but I didn't know what I was here to do or how to figure out what I was here to do. I was lost, basically. And so Spirit staged an intervention in 2003. And three very important things happened all within just a few weeks of each other. I had my first session ever with a psychic medium, and she introduced me to the concept of spirit guides. She started the session by saying, your spirit guides are here. And I had to say, what is a spirit guide? Never heard that term before.
Sure. Yeah.
So that tells you where I was at that point in my life. Well, she explained that, and then she started to channel my guides. The first thing they said right out of the box, you planned your life, including your biggest challenges, before you were born. And I said, well, why in the world would I have done that? Well, then they launched into this lengthy monologue in which they went through my challenges one by one. And they explained in detail why I had planned those difficult experiences. And what was really compelling here is that I hadn't told them anything about myself. I hadn't told the medium anything before the session. So, when you're talking to beings who know literally everything about you without you saying a word, it gives them a lot of credibility. So sure. This opened me up to this idea of pre-birth planning. In the days and weeks after that session with the medium, I thought about this perspective constantly. It created really quite a deep healing for me because it allowed me for the first time in my life to see deeper meaning to the most difficult challenges. And then I thought, well, if it can create this kind of healing for me, it surely can do the same for others. That was when I first started to think about writing a book on the subject. Then I met a woman who can channel her higher self and spent about 15 hours talking with her higher self about pre-birth planning, why we do it, how it works. And then really the most powerful experience of all, I had what is called an STE, a spiritually transformative experience. This is just a few weeks after these other two experiences. I was home alone in my apartment in Chicago where I lived at the time. And in the middle of a weekday afternoon, I decided to take a break from work and go for a walk. So I'm walking down the sidewalk when all of a sudden, this feeling of pure, overwhelming, unconditional love for every person I saw washed over me. And, this was not a human kind of love. To call it divine unconditional love doesn't even begin to describe it. You know what I'm talking about. So every time I looked at another person, this just pure, incandescent, luminescent, overwhelming love for the person washed over me. And I was caused to know, as this was happening, that we as souls are made literally from the energy of unconditional love. I got that message loud and clear. What I didn't know was why this was happening at that time. A couple of years later, I got the answer to that question. By that time, I had looked at a lot of people's pre-birth plans for my first book, Your Soul's Plan. And what I found in every case, no exceptions, the pre-birth plan was always based on complete unconditional love for every person involved. This was true when great challenges were being planned. It was true when negative roles were being scripted. It was always based on total unconditional love for every single person involved. And then I thought, aha, that experience walking down the street a couple of years ago, that was gifted to me so that when I found this result in my research, I would be certain it was true. So the combination of those experiences got me to say, okay, I'm leaving the corporate world. I'll write a book about how we plan our lives and why we plan challenges. And that led to a whole new life.
Fascinating trajectory, leap of faith, but it seemed for you that evidence was needed and it happened in front of you through others and yourself, that you're able to have this gift, that you recognize that there's so much more to this life, even and especially with their own pain. Many people just wonder, and there's a whole book by, I think, was it Harold Kushner, says, why do bad things happen to good people?
Right.
And a great book. Go into any library, it's there. And so, especially we're going through a lot right now, the last couple of years, from a macrocosm to a microcosm. But for you, what have you learned as to why we go through certain struggles? Is it subjective in its nature? Is some things just out of our control? Is everything there for a reason? What have you gathered?
There are really two levels on which I can answer that question. One is analytic, and the other is more heart-based. So the analytic, logical answer, there are 5 main reasons, and we can talk about them as you like. They're balancing, releasing karma, healing, service to others, experiencing contrast, which means experiencing not love, and healing or correcting false feelings or false beliefs about the self. We could probably spend an hour on any one of those. So those are the logical, linear, left brain reasons why we plan big challenges. But, and that is extremely healing and helpful in understanding the majority of challenges. But when we get to really extreme things, it just defies mental understanding. Even if we know everything there is to know about those 5 main reasons, it still seems incomprehensible to the human brain that anybody would plan or agree to go through the kinds of extreme things some people experience here. And it really was not until this year that I understood the full explanation. The reason some souls are willing to undergo really extreme challenges is that when we're back on the other side, we're using a completely different operating system to make choices. It's not the mind anymore, it's the heart. And the heart wants one thing and one thing only, and that is to give and receive love. So, if you're back on the other side, and let's say God says to you, your brothers and sisters on earth are in trouble. There is great, great suffering. You can help. Will you go? It will mean great suffering for you, but you can help. Will you go? If the heart is your operating system, the answer to that question is an immediate yes. All the heart wants is to give and receive love. If the mind were the operating system, then you would be asking questions. Well, what am I going to get out of it? How will I grow? What will I learn? There are good answers to those questions. Those are the 5 analytic reasons I gave earlier. But the reason we do those things is to love.
So you would say most of our existence is predicated on bringing love to this world and finding that, you would say. Now, let me ask you, how much of life do you find to be a voluntary circumstance where before we're here, much like an NDE, like they're told, hey, it's not your time, go back, or you're given autonomy? How much percentage do you find in the life between lives that it's a soul's maybe urge to come back versus how much is it, kind of like our guides and loved ones saying, it would be a good opportunity for you? How much of life is, free will before we get here to come here?
I've now written 3 books about pre-birth planning. And the format is we go topic by topic, chapter by chapter, each chapter devoted to the pre-birth planning of a particular and common sort of life challenge. And this is not in the books. I took it out for different reasons, but frequently in the channeling sessions for the chapters, I would be talking to somebody's spirit guide, an angel, an ascended master. And I would ask the question, what percentage of the time is this particular challenge planned before birth versus, more of an unforeseen event? And it varied depending upon what the specific challenge was. But usually it was around 70% that was agreed to before birth. When I say planned, I mean planned as a high probability. Not necessarily a certainty. Very few things are planned as certainties. So that still leaves 30%. There's a lot happening that was viewed as possible but unlikely before we incarnated. But the vast majority of the time, it is foreseen, it is likely, and it's with our agreement.
I see. So a lot of it, you would say there's predetermined factors, but also free will is not something that will leave our existence, that we still have autonomy to change our trajectory. How do you feel some souls are more in alignment with their pre-birth planning, and maybe how some may forget about this? Like, how do you feel that happens as to some souls remembering this and some seems to kind of forget that? Why is that?
Well, I think almost everybody, unless it's part of your plan and you're a very highly evolved soul, almost everybody is going to experience the amnesia that happens when you come to this kind of density. That's a function of the low vibration, the density of the earth plane. And then many, many beings, especially during this particular incarnation, have a pre-birth plan to spiritually awaken. But you don't have to be awake in order to be following your pre-birth plans. So anybody who is living in joy, anybody who's being the most loving person they can be, anybody who is following their excitement or their bliss, anybody who's using the law of resonance, following what resonates with them, those people are all fulfilling their pre-birth intentions. They're just not consciously aware of it. But you do have free will. You always have free will. It's sacrosanct. And there's an intersection between free will and pre-birth planning, and that intersection determines what actually happens in your experience.
Yes. So you would determine our life's purpose in a way, because a lot of people come up to me and ask, what's my life's purpose? But from what you're saying, understanding some of the specifics, could help. But really, when you're in joy, when you're in that high vibratory field, that's a collective purpose that we all share. That's allows us also to see clear into our soul, into who we are. Is that about right? Or would you maybe elaborate on the life's purpose a little bit more, or is that kind of it?
Well, I think ultimately that's where every soul would like the personality to go. Your soul would like you to be swimming in joy, ultimately. Now, depending upon your pre-birth plans, there may be portions of the life, possibly very large portions of the incarnation, in which it's seen as highly likely that you will not be in a state of joy. But as I understand it, nobody's soul wants them to remain stuck in that place. Your soul wants you to get to that place of joy. And the pre-birth plans are set up so that the resources are there the healing potential is there. And if you use your free will to take advantage of it, you can get to that place of joy. Everybody can do that eventually.
I mean, would you say to an extent, people born in dire and difficult circumstances have maybe a more resilience to their soul? Would there be anything that you're born into that you couldn't handle? So therefore, if that resistance is there an innate resilience that may allow those souls to be born in those circumstances? Or how would you describe those dire circumstances and souls that may incarnate in those situations?
One of the best sources of information about that type of rebirth plan is a body of general literature called the Michael system. So Michael here is not a reference to Archangel Michael. Michael is a collective, a group consciousness that channeled a lot of information about pre-birth plans relative to soul age and soul archetype and a number of other factors as well. So what Michael says about that is that the things you will focus on in the incarnation, in the pre-birth plans, are to a very large extent a function of your soul age. And in the Michael system, there are five or six categories of soul age. And it's something like infant, young, middle-aged, mature, and old. So according to Michael, the younger souls who do not have much experience on the earth plane, they're interested in exploring issues of physical survival on the earth plane. And they will tend to incarnate in certain locations like Africa that lends itself to that kind of exploration. So when you hear about these more extreme lifetimes of poverty and so forth, not always, but very often it's an infant soul who just hasn't been here very much and is exploring survival on the physical plane.
Yes, and that different soul ages, really could impact our trajectory and where we go, what we decide to do within this life. How would you personally define the soul in general, though? That's a question that I'm often asked, and I'm just like, I just describe it as the essence of all things divine and love. But for you, to start for viewers, like, how would you describe the soul? Like, what is the soul?
I always say that the soul is a spark of God and the personality is a spark of the soul. So you, the person hearing this conversation, you are a portion of your soul's energy placed into a physical body. But the soul is a vast, multi-dimensional consciousness, and the portion that's placed in the physical body is just a part of that.
So does that tie into the fact that you could be here in this physical, but is there maybe a part of your soul that is higher beyond this physical or on different planes? Or do you feel the entirety of our soul is in this life, in this body?
Well, here's an interesting anecdote that addresses that. Many years ago, it was after the spiritual awakening I described, and right when I was starting the research for my first book, Spirit brought me together with a woman who has the ability to channel any consciousness. And I spent a week with this person, and she would channel whoever I asked her to channel, or whatever consciousness I asked her to channel every day that we were together. So one day she said to me, "Who or what would you like to talk to today?" And I don't know why this came to mind, but I said, "I'd like to talk to the higher self of Julia Roberts." So she gets quiet and tunes in, and then all of a sudden this announcement comes: "I am the higher self of Julia Roberts." So we exchanged some pleasantries, and then her higher self says to me, I would like to give you," meaning humanity, not me personally, "I'd like to give you an expanded understanding of what a higher self is." She said, "People tend to think of the higher self as a discrete entity, and you humans, you believe that the higher self is up here and you are down there." And Julia's higher self said, "This is really not the case. Think of me, think of the higher self in general as a continuum. So in my case, the continuum runs from the lowest vibrational point, which would be Julia, the incarnate personality, all the way up to the highest dimension in which I have a presence. And you can speak with me at any point along that continuum. The answers to your questions will actually vary slightly depending upon where you contact me along that continuum. So that really opened up my understanding of what a higher self is.
Do you feel when you were walking, after you had that transformative experience, that there was a part of you that might have connected to people's higher self, and that's what caused that reaction, that feeling of love? Do you feel a little bit about what happened? Were you able to see the essence of someone's being? Do you feel a connection to people's higher selves that you had?
As that was happening, and even since then, I didn't identify it as specifically seeing or connecting to people's higher selves. But earlier this year, I actually had my first non-dual experience, which was an experience of my own higher self. And I'll share that with you because I think people will find this interesting and helpful. I was in Florida, and I was sitting outside in a lawn chair at about 8:30 in the morning watching the sun come up. And all of a sudden, there was this whoosh of very powerful energy that came in through the crown chakra, filled my physical body and filled my entire energy field. And I understood as this was happening that this was my higher self. I don't know how I knew that, but I knew that it was my higher self. The energy felt deeply, deeply powerful and deeply still. There was a knowing that all is well, always, no matter how it might seem on the surface. There was also a knowing that I'm inviolable. Nothing can actually hurt me. This energy was so powerful and so still, and it completely changed my understanding of who I am, or perhaps it would be better to say what I am. I actually remember thinking to myself as this was happening, oh, that's what I am. That is the true me, and the personality that I've been perceiving myself as. That's more of a temporary coating or a covering while I'm here.
That's beautiful. It's amazing how the box of reality impacts our behaviors and how we see ourselves in the nature of the world. Do you personally feel that box, has been filled, or you constantly try to look at yourselves in reality and expand that box? Or do you feel like you have it, you have a knowing of like reality, or is it to you open-ended right now?
Well, I think there's always more. So my understanding through these kinds of experiences that I've shared with you today has expanded enormously from where it used to be. But I know that there's always more, and there always will be more, and I will never have a complete or full understanding of everything in existence. But that's a good and exciting thing from my point of view. So, my current spiritual path is sort of a contradiction in a way, because there's a part of me that wants, like I think many of your audience, to always move on to the next greatest, highest understanding. But at the same time, because of the non-dual experience I had, there's another part of the personality that just wants to rest, relax, be still, be spacious, not be pursuing different objects of consciousness, meaning thoughts, feelings, and sensations. So these two things are a bit in contradiction to each other. They both exist simultaneously.
Yeah, Rob, and a lot of my viewers and people that I have spoken to throughout the years, who they want these near-death experiences, they want these STEs. So from what you're saying, it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, that's a part of all of us. Even if we've had those experiences, we still want more. But there's a lot of beauty in stillness and being mindful and being in the present. I think that's a beautiful statement. I think every viewer should really take notice to that, because that's a lot of where the beauty is found, this moment without interference. Would you also say that, I mean, I, at least for myself, could attest to this, but a lot of NDEs and STEs are a part of your pre-birth planning? Like that seems something very extraordinary in one's lifetime. So I would wonder, have you ever had any specific examples of NDEers or SDEers that you know of who have also had memories of the pre-birth, circumstance of their situation?
I haven't researched that for any of my books, but it is my understanding that both of those kinds of experiences are planned before birth. And in my case, I am absolutely certain that experience I had walking down the street that day, that was part of my pre-birth plan. I needed that experience in order to go on to do all the work that I've done since that time.
So you think it's kind of like when you're ready, that expansive experience will happen, and not to try to force it, you would say, right?
I agree with that completely. I've been reading a book recently by a woman who had you could say that she's fully self-realized. She had that kind of full, complete awakening. And the way she described it, I liked her wording. She said, I tilled the soil, but she didn't create the experience of the awakening, which was quite sudden and abrupt. And she doesn't take credit for it. She just says she created the conditions that allowed it to happen.
In other words, like, I'm a football guy, but in order to make plays, you need to be on the field. Like, most of football is like 4-yard gain, hit the line. I'm a Jets fan, usually 5-yard loss. But, eventually there's daylight, things happen. But people who are on the field, can make plays. It's once you take yourself off and lose awareness, that's when it's harder to see these things and to experience these transformations, I feel.
Well, I completely agree with that. You do have to be on the field to make a play. And so that raises the question, well, what does it mean to be on the field? I think it comes back to what we've been talking about here about stillness, presence, silence, spaciousness. That puts you on the field. That's tilling the soil and creating the conditions for those kinds of experiences.
Right. Yeah, I think what you described is a lot of the beingness that people miss out. They focus on the doing. And I always say, are you a human being or a human doing? And, so that being, that presence, that's really how we're alive while we're alive. We're present in the present. So I love that. I'd like to ask you, for you, what do you feel exactly happens in the pre-birth planning? Because I certainly in my NDE and subsequently as a kid have all these memories of my own pre-birth planning, but I feel my experience may be unique, but I'm just wondering from your end, through working with channelers and research, like, what specifically have you find to be universally involved? Is it something different for soul by soul circumstance, or is there something uniformal happening before we get here?
So in my second book, Your Soul's Gift, there's a lengthy conversation I have in a channeling session with Jesus toward the beginning of the book, where I ask him, how is pre-birth planning usually done? And the process he outlines, he says, the pre-birth plans are created by the soul, by the higher self, in consultation with God, angels, spirit guides, and masters. And then the higher self creates the personality, the portion of its energy that will go into the physical body. Then at that point, the personality is informed as to what the pre-birth plans consist of. Jesus goes on to say that after being informed of the plans, the vast, vast majority of people agree to the plans, primarily because they sense this overwhelming unconditional love coming from their guides and their higher self. So that reassures them that this is for everybody's highest good. They agree, they go into body. But he says there's a small percentage of people who begin to experience human emotions like fear and doubt. Principally fear and doubt that the plan is too ambitious, too difficult. If you express fear or doubt that it's too much, then you are reassured by your higher self and guides that it is for the highest good of all. At that point, most of those who expressed doubt agree to the plan and they incarnate. But there's a small percentage of the percentage who express doubt who continue to express doubt. And if you do that, Jesus says the plans are amended until they are completely acceptable to you. So bottom line, nobody is forced to do anything they don't want to do and that they don't agree to do.
I love that, the fact that it's suggested, it's, kind of, there's an intelligence beyond our own showing us the path, but ultimately, really, we have to want it. It's not coerced or forced. There's still autonomy despite, some of the nudging that goes on.
Right.
I would like to transition right now into your current work, because I think we have a lot of crossover. Like, I'm more of a past life guy, but even, within my past life regressions, we do see people with memories on the other side, and some tie into the pre-birth planning. But can you tell us a little bit about your current work that you do today? I know you see clients and utilize hypnosis, and you have a terminology I think we discussed beforehand that was, it was a couple acronyms involved, but I think a lot of it has to do with the pre-birth planning and stuff like that. But could you elaborate a little bit about your processing and how that works if I was a client to have a session with Rob Schwartz?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's called a Between Lives Soul Regression, or a BLSR for short.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it either in a private session or as part of one of our online workshops in a group. It works quite well either way. The basic process, it takes about 2 hours. We start with some preliminary steps to help you relax physically and mentally. Then I guide the client or the group into a past life. It's almost always the past life that had a big impact on the plans for the current lifetime. In the group workshops, you experience 4 different scenes in the past life. In a private session, it might be fewer or more than 4. And the last scene you experience will be the death scene in the past life. You leave the body in the death scene and cross back over to the other side. So you go home, which might sound a little bit ominous to some people. There's actually nothing to it. It's very easy and gentle. When you get back to the other side, most likely you'll be greeted by a spirit guide. The guide will tell you whatever's important to know about the past life. And then the guide will take you to what is called your council of elders. Those are the very wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who oversee your personal evolution. So everybody's got their own council. When you get to your council, you can ask them literally any question on any subject, and if it's for the highest good, they will answer your questions. So most people ask, what did I plan? Why? How am I doing? And how can I better fulfill my plans? But you can also ask about any relationship that is challenging to you. You can ask why you planned certain challenges and how to heal from them. Whatever the current issues are in your lifetime, you can ask about those and how to most lovingly and wisely respond to them. You can ask for healing from the council. You can ask to travel to other places that you might want to go to in the universe. You can ask for loved ones who have transitioned to come into your meeting with the council and talk with them. That's very helpful for forgiveness, if anybody has more forgiveness work to do. So essentially, you can tailor the experience to whatever your own needs and desires are. People sometimes are nervous the council will judge them. That never happens. They come out of the session and they will say things like, I could feel the council's complete unconditional love and acceptance of me. And I never felt judged at all. In fact, I could tell that although the council knew about all the quote unquote bad things I've done, they loved me completely unconditionally anyway. And for many people, that's really their first experience of true unconditional love since coming into body. So it's really a homecoming in many ways, and it's deeply, deeply healing.
How do you feel some of your clients have been able to apply some of what they experienced within your regression? Has it, changed or altered their worldviews afterwards? Has it, do you feel led to practical ideological changes for them, would you say?
Well, first and foremost, I think the most profound benefit is that if somebody is in a place of victim consciousness, it's quite powerful at pulling you out of there. And that is vitally important. Victim consciousness, as I understand it, is literally the lowest vibration a human being can be at. And you really cannot accomplish any kind of meaningful growth or healing from that vibration. It essentially just blocks everything and keeps you stuck. So if you believe or perceive yourself to be a victim, you want to do something about that. And when you come into an awareness and knowing that you yourself, planned your biggest challenges, that will just catapult you out of victim consciousness. Also, with a lot of the encounters people have with loved ones in the meeting with the council, they'll often talk to loved ones who were abusive to them in some way, or betrayed them, or hurt them in some way. And as the discussion goes along, they come to understand that they did agree to this plan, and that the plan is based on unconditional love and wisdom, great wisdom for every person involved. So it makes forgiveness and understanding possible in ways that previously had been impossible. It's really just profoundly healing.
It's incredible what you're saying, because I give I like this practical apartment analogy where we're on one level, the first floor, we could just see so much. Then we get to the 10th to 15th floor, all of a sudden we see the whole community or anything like that. And so from what you're saying is perspective is reality. When people are able to enter the upper rooms of their awareness, they're able to have a lot more clarity. Thus, that understanding will influence their behaviors and how they see the world. So I think it's just another way to clarify perception of matters.
Yeah, and I can speak to this from personal experience, because my own family background is that my mother has quite significant mental health issues and was extremely abusive to me throughout my childhood.
Oh.
And I had an experience actually just earlier this year in which I would say about 75% of my consciousness went back to the other side, and about a quarter stayed in body. So I still knew who I was, where I was, what I was doing, but most of me went back to the other side. When I got there, my mother was there. Now she's still here in a body, so this was her higher self. And I kept saying to her, I love you, I love you, I love you. And as I was saying this, I felt this overwhelming, pure, unconditional love for her concentrated right in my heart chakra. Much more powerful than any love I felt for her since coming into body. And I had a knowing through this experience that this love is the nature of our relationship when we're home on the other side. Now, for various reasons, I scripted this extremely difficult experience with her, and she played that role, and she played the role quite well, sometimes too well from my personal point of view as an incarnate human. But that experience with her higher self on the other side, I understood all is well. There's nothing but love between the two of us. And it may not be that way while we're both still here in body due to the limitations of her mental health. But I know back on the other side, that's the nature of our relationship with each other.
Wow. It seems like that macro understanding of reality has allowed you to shed this light on this micro experience that you're having with her in the physical, and to remember what's an experience versus what's the ultimate eternal reality of a dynamic.
Well, that's just it. This lifetime is an experience, but the ultimate eternal reality is one of complete unconditional love. I've known that intellectually for many years through the work I did, the research from my books, but that experience confirmed it.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing, the direct experiences versus the intellectual understanding? I think, understanding is a part of it, but until you're in a pool, you don't know what that pool is. And so once you get into the pool, you're like, wow, so I've had that myself for certain. And I could say really that could really accelerate change process. And you can't be a doubter after the first evidential experience of what you had. Rob, I'm wondering what the Zoom limit is in the world, because it seems like the whole world could use a regression with you right now with everything happening, but hopefully more people will start to tune into it. But with everything going on right now, and this is not a political station, I don't get into it, but a lot of people just feel, what's the point? Everything's going on, we're going backwards. A lot of, archaic behaviors are putting themselves up to the surface. But I'm just wondering, do you have any perspective about how one can navigate these times, or anything about the muck that's coming up to the surface, in this world? Like, how could we really generate the hope past a lot of the pain that we feel as empathic beings and people who feel, a lot of what's going on?
Well, I think one of the best ways we can navigate what's currently happening is through understanding what is really happening, because what's really going on underneath the surface is quite different than what you see if you just watch the news. And I have a lot to say on this subject. The gist of what is happening here, as I understand it, so I'm sure your audience knows we're going through an ascension process, literally ascending in vibration. Ascension, as I understand it, is caused by a lot of divine light from source flooding the planet. The light has the effect of bringing to the surface everything unlike itself, everything of a lower vibration. So this is happening collectively to the human race, which is why you see all the craziness in the news. It's happening individually in each person's life, whether they're consciously aware of it or not. So at a collective level, basically what's happening, you have the vast majority of the human race flowing like a strong river from one direction to another, flowing from separation consciousness toward unity or oneness consciousness. If you look at something like what's happening in Ukraine or in the Middle East, it's like a big boulder in the middle of that strongly flowing river. So what happens if a strong river impacts a boulder? There's going to be a lot of turbulence. That turbulence will often manifest in the form of war. It doesn't have to be war. It could be something else of a large scale nature, like a natural disaster, a famine, but it's going to manifest as something big and something we would consider negative. Now, people look at all these negative things that are happening and they say things are getting worse, and they feel despair about it, which is understandable. But here's the key thing to know. If you think about what happens when light strikes an object, it casts a shadow. And the brighter the light, the darker the shadow, until at a certain point, there's so much light that it just dissolves the shadow. I think that humanity is at or close to the point of maximal darkness of the shadow. But that means we're just one short step away from dissolution of the shadow. That's the important thing to keep in mind.
So there is hope, for light to win, and hopefully we're rounding the corner of so much of this darkness, some of these medieval behaviors still occurring in the modern day evolved world. So I hope my listeners will continue to replay that segment, because it's very significant to understand from a higher perspective with some of these lower vibratory continual behaviors occurring. Well, Rob, I couldn't thank you enough for your time, for your profound insights. If viewers want to contact you for a soul regression session, or to purchase one of your incredible books, or just ask questions, where's some of the best ways to find you? Is it your website or social media?
The website is the best place to go. If you're interested in learning more about the Between Lives Soul Regression, click on Sessions in the main menu. There's actually a 1-hour video of a BLSR on that page, so you can see exactly what it's like. If you have questions on any spiritual subject, go to the contact form at yoursoulsplan.com. I actually read and respond to my email. It might take a few weeks, but I will respond to every email I get. And join us for any of the workshops that interest you. They're all on the events page. We have the BLSR workshop, but there's also a Star Souls workshop for people who feel that they come from a faraway place and want to know what the heck they're doing here on planet Earth. We don't have any scheduled right now, but we will have later next year an empath workshop, a higher self workshop. There are BLSR workshops translated into Spanish, Polish, German. So there's a lot going on. And please sign up for the newsletter. That'll keep you informed. And
you're also on Instagram and social media too. I follow you, and you have great stuff there. And, Rob, you're someone who's, I see as you may not see this your way, but you're a tremendous luminary, and you're one of those people who are assisting in that wonderful light, and your reach is broad bound. We're going to be coming up to the new year soon. I'm asking a lot of my guests here in the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder if there's any last messages that we have to really start off, with our attention towards our intentions. So do you have anything that's been calling you from a higher perspective, maybe for viewers to hear as we go into the new year? Any specific messages before we wrap up our incredible conversation together here.
I think the take-home message I'd like to leave people with, it's my understanding that in order to be incarnate now for this ascension lifetime, you had to make a 1 in 3 cut. In other words, it was so desirable to be here for ascension. There were approximately 3 times as many souls who wanted to incarnate as available bodies, as projected according to people's pre-birth plans. So the way people were chosen to be here, the way you made that cut, you had to have something specific to offer the ascension process. Maybe you know what it is, maybe you haven't yet determined that, but you were chosen because you have something in particular to offer Earth, to offer humanity. So honor yourselves for having the great courage to come here and whatever abilities you brought in service to ascension, and honor everybody else for those same qualities.
Rob, you're a gift, my man. Thank you so much for all you do. And it's incredible to see the transformation that you had in your personal, professional life. And I do believe, it's possible for everyone. We all have this connection in us to transform, transcend. A dark moment in our life, like you took a lot of that pain of uncertainty. And I think a lot of that led to more certainty and more of your own influence of your purpose. So you are in lockstep with a lot of healers who have been on my channel that have been able to transcend their pain into purpose. And my hope is we could do this collectively, and it starts one soul at a time. But we can't leave any souls behind, no souls left behind. We all have to really work out our stuff and connect to this and remember who we are, just as you did. So thank you for setting that shining light example on so many in the world.
Yeah, and thank you for all the great work you're doing in the world, your books, this podcast, everything. You're bringing tremendous light to the planet. And in my opinion, beautifully fulfilling your pre-birth plan. So thank you for doing that.
Amen. Amen. Well, Rob, thank you so much. And you're welcome back anytime here on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. Be well. Well, that was a wonderful interview with Rob Schwartz. We covered a lot of terrain, from understanding the soul to the pre-birth planning to understanding why we're here, what bad things happen in the world, what is some of the ways to look at things through not the victim mindset, but the growth-oriented mindset that we constantly reference. So Rob was a great guest. He's welcome back anytime, and I do recommend checking out his site, his events, as well as looking into his soul regression as well, too, to get more clarity on who you are with the blueprint that has come before, this life, with your guides, the elders, all your angels, and beyond. So Rob was a terrific guest, and he's had quite a transformation in his own life. So thank you all for tuning into our conversation here with Rob Schwartz. Make sure you comment, share, and subscribe to grow the community and improve the algorithm here so we can reach more souls and cast more light onto the darkness going on to the world. So thank you for tuning in. This is Jacob Cooper here signing off, and I'll see you next week on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Be well. Thank you.